Hello there, welcome back to the booth here at Pro Tour Guilds of Ravnica. That's Duke. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe. Thank you so much for coming along for coverage of our top 8 here on Sunday. This is the marquee matchup of our semifinals. This is our second semifinal. This will put the last player into the finals. It is either going to be from France, Jérémy Dezani playing for Team Hareruya Sword, or on the other side of the table from the United States, Scott-Vargas for Team ChannelFireball. Only one can continue in the tournament, and we're going to find out which one it is right now. Hello and welcome to coverage of Pro Tour Guilds of Ravnica. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe in the booth with Reed Duke. And boy, oh boy, Reed, we have a really great matchup here in our second semifinal. This could be one for the ages. It is Jérémy Dezani from France. He's playing for Team Hareruya Sword, playing Boros Aggro. You can tell because of his shirt. He lined up his jersey with his deck choice. On the other side of the table, Scott-Vargas from the United States playing for Team ChannelFireball, and he also is playing Boros Aggro. So a handshake to kick things off, and it is a best of 5 to decide who's going to make it back to the Pro Tour Finals. Both of these players have been there before. Both of them have hoisted the trophy, but only one can continue from here, Reed. The matchup? Not quite a mirror match, actually. It's a little bit different. A heavy white deck in the hands of Scott-Vargas, and he has some technology that might come in handy for this near mirror.
Yeah, you're referring, of course, to the card that Luis set up for us in his interview, a Johnny's Pridemate, which, when paired with either a lifelink creature or this Leonin Vanguard, can grow to dominate the ground in a matchup like this. Neither player with too much removal. So a Johnny's Pridemate, once it gets up to 4/4, 5/5, that it's there. It's holding off the ground and potentially the card that the entire game can center on. Now, it doesn't look like he had it on turn 2 here, but still setting up nicely with 3 1-drops. These Leonin Vanguards, remember, they trigger even if they're not attacking, so Luis is going to pick up 2 life right there already on the second turn.
One of them being protected by the Dauntless Bodyguard. Also, he's going to chip in for 2 damage thanks to the +1/+1. So back to Dezani, who has a 1-drop and a 2-drop. A fine curve out from him as well.
This is awesome, Marshall. I mean, what can you say about these 2 players that would not be true? Jérémy Dezani, Pro Tour Champion, Player of the Year. Scott-Vargas, Pro Tour Champion as well. Top 5 player of all time. Beloved by Magic fans around the world. I think back to just the epic matches in Magic history. Scott-Vargas versus Gabriel Nassif in the finals of the Pro Tour. Brad Nelson against Paul Rietzl. Just epic matches. Jérémy Dezani playing against Guillaume Wafatapa and Control Mirrors. The ones that people are going to go back and watch for years. And I ask myself, is this going to be one of those matches? Just 2 elite players at the top of their game playing a really challenging, close matchup. We could be in for a real treat here.
Yeah, we're going to be playing a best of 5. The first 2 games are going to be pre-sideboard. Then after that, any subsequent games will include sideboards. A great turn here for Dezani. He goes 1, 2, 3. The perfect curve out for his deck so far, culminating right now with History of Benalia. But that's not going to slow Scott-Vargas down. He says, I want to go to combat. That's going to get a couple of triggers, a couple of life, and bang, everything into the red zone. He does have Pride of Conquerors in his hand right now. Though, when you look at the board, even though it looks pretty filled up for Dezani, he actually only has a 2/2. That's his board right now, as far as blocking goes.
I love the approach that Luis and his team ChannelFireball have taken to this mirror match, which is to emphasize life total advantage. Now, that's something that's not obvious to me because it's one of the first things you learn as an up-and-coming Magic player that, you know what, life total is not everything. You're not supposed to put a Healing Solve or an Angel's Mercy in your main deck because that's a card that doesn't help your board position, only your life total. But what Luis and his team have done is they've found ways to translate life total advantage into board presence advantage. I found it fascinating the way Luis was talking about his matchup against the card Heroic Reinforcements, where he said, you know what? If that card comes down and my opponent is not able to capitalize on the big turn by killing me or forcing me into unfavorable blocks, it's just not that good. It's 4 mana for 2 1/1s. So Luis, by bolstering his life total advantage, he gives himself more flexibility in how he's going to attack, how he's going to block, and how he's going to navigate the race.
Okay, the follow-up play for Dezani was a Boros Challenger and nothing else thus far. Life totals are evened up at 12 apiece. There's a bit of a race happening, but also the board's starting to get filled up. Ooh, but there's Banalish Marshall for Luis Scott-Vargas. He says, I want to go to combat, gain a couple of life. And once again, he's on right-click attack all mode here, Reed. He's just sending everything into the red zone repeatedly.
That's another card that Luis highlighted as being a crucial one in this matchup, and it's one that Jérémy Dezani does not have access to. He's got a lot of sweet red cards in his deck, like that Boros Challenger, like Aurelia, Exemplar of Justice, but playing the basic mountains forces him to eschew Banalish Marshall, which is a card that the other 5 white aggro players in our top 8 have made really good use of, one that's giving Luis Scott-Vargas a big advantage on this battlefield.
Jérémy Dezani. He takes his time with these rough combat decisions. A lot can hinge on one set of blocks or one attack step. This matchup can be very swingy, mainly because of cards like Banalish Marshall, where the board state looks one way, but by the time your opponent's attacking you, it looks completely different. Other cards, Pride of Conquerors come to mind, and Heroic Reinforcements as well, can completely change the complexion of one attack step.
So now Dezani with access to Pride of Conquerors on defense, which is interesting and gives him a lot of options here, but noteworthy, he has exactly 9 permanents, not quite enough for City's Blessing. So I wonder if Dezani, being the careful, studious player that he is, might save it, or if he's actually going to pull the trigger and try to get a favorable exchange.
Okay. So, yeah, that's fine.
So Luis points out, well, I do have the bodyguard saving that Leonin Vanguard, but that's okay. Jérémy says, I want to double block the one that can't get saved. And Luis says, yep, I understand. And that transaction just takes place. So Luis Scott-Vargas ahead in the damage race, but here's a big turn for Dezani.
I actually think Dezani maybe should have blocked the one that could have been saved, because if Luis chose to save it, then that's one more unblocked creature that's not dealing damage.
Interesting. Well, he chose not to. And he has fallen down to 6, but Chapter 3 of History of Benalia just happened. So any knights that he has are going to get +2/+1. Take a quick look at a Danto Vanguard there and note, not a knight.
Look at this, Marshall. Both players at 6. 6 is the exact number of life points that Luis Scott-Vargas has gained off of his Leonin Vanguards this game.
You're right.
So just a crystal clear example in game 1 of Luis's life gain strategy and the differences between his build and the rest of the white aggro decks coming in huge, allowing him to continue attacking in a close race situation where otherwise he might have to be playing defense.
Look at this, though. Aurelia hits the battlefield for Jérémy Dezani, one of the most powerful cards in the matchup. And what can Luis come up with? Oh, he has the answer for Aurelia. In fact, a nice turn sequence here for Luis Scott-Vargas. He plays Legion's Landing and Conclave Tribunal in the same turn. And once again, Luis in the red zone. He's attacking with everything, basically every time he can.
Yeah, that's a huge turn for Luis, being able to answer the Aurelia, which he mentioned as one of Dezani's key advantages in the matchup. But a clean one-for-one answer, that's perfect. Allows him to keep attacking. The Banalish Marshall, of course, continuing to help his creatures outsize Dezani's.
And this is exactly what you talked about before in our first semifinal, Reed. He has forced Dezani into unfavorable blocks. That's the key, because now Luis has a board state and Dezani doesn't. And it looks like it's just Sky Marcher Aspirant here for Jérémy Dezani. Luis draws his card for the turn, says, I'm going right to combat. And once again, pedal to the metal for Luis Scott-Vargas. He has not stopped attacking this whole entire game. This draw coming together just enough, perhaps, for him to get the job done. And once you see your opponent start blocking with a Danto Vanguard, you know it's not going well for them. And there's Pride of Conquerors for lethal as well. Luis Scott-Vargas picks up game number 1. But I'll say something here, Reed. He had no wiggle room there.
Yeah, that phrase that you used, Marshall, just enough. That was the story of that game. Luis had just enough life points, just enough power on the board, just enough mana, and he navigated really well to a win. His draw was not amazing. It was fine. He had some creatures in the early turns, but it's not like one of those amazing, 20 power on turn 3 type draws that we've seen sometimes from these white aggro decks. It was just a normal aggressive draw. He was making the decision to not play around heroic reinforcements, to put his very few thin resources towards attacking Dezani's life total, and it just barely worked out. The Pride of Conquerors on the last turn, perhaps giving him a little bit of a wider margin, but he navigated to a position where he was winning with the bare minimum number of resources.
Let's take a deep breath here, Reed. And you at home as well. We've got plenty more Magic to bring you today. We're going to be finishing this semifinal and then moving our way towards the finals as well. So, game number 2 of semifinal number 2 between these two gentlemen will be coming to you right after these messages.
Up your game with Ultra Pro Magic the Gathering accessories. Find the best Magic art on card sleeves, deck boxes, playmats, and more. Visit ultrapro.com to learn more and find a retailer near you.
Welcome back to the feature match area here in Atlanta, Georgia. We're here for Pro Tour Guilds of Ravnica. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe in the booth with Reed Duke. Thank you for spending your time with us. We do appreciate it. We are in our second semifinal of the day. We've already got one finalist. That was Andrew Ellenbogen from the United States. He eagerly awaits his competitor, but I'll tell you what, he's going to have his hands full no matter how this match ends, because we have two Pro Tour champions sitting across from each other here. A quick game one goes to Luis Scott-Vargas, and these games can be quick, so you'll make sure you want to stick around. This is not time to go make a sandwich. In the meantime, Hunted Witness hits the battlefield here for Dezani.
Ugh, Luis with the dreaded nightmare double clifftop retreat draw. It's very difficult for the lands in this white aggro deck to enter the battlefield tapped, but this is the one where it can happen, and Luis very, very much punished, very much slowed down by not having a basic plains.
Yeah, and a really nice curve out here from Dezani as well with the Adanto Vanguard, the hardest hitting 2-drop he has in his deck. And he's followed up by using up all of his mana pretty much. He went 1-drop, 2-drop, 2-drop so far. And all that Luis has been able to muster are a pair of Healer's Hawks. Well, now 3 Lifelinkers on the battlefield. Maybe he can scrap his way back into this.
It's going to be difficult. I think he really needed to hit his 3rd land there. His creatures are just too small. The good news is that, you know, maybe he can take this hit here, attack back, and flip the Legion's Landing to have a little more mana to work with. But he is pretty far behind. He's just deployed a lot fewer creatures. He spent a lot less mana.
Stacked. Take a look at this. Benalish Marshal, Pride of Conquerors.
Yeah.
He even has an Ajani's Pride Mate.
Yeah, okay, so an untapped land here would be great. He plays the Marshal, he attacks for 6 lifelink, he transforms the Legion's Landing, then he plays a 1-drop post-combat.
Ooh, that's a plains off the top of the library.
Right in time.
Can he actually swing this damage race back in his favor after Jérémy Dezani took advantage of the very slow start from Luis? He's going to play Benalish Marshal, attack with all, transform. There's only 1 blocker on the other side of the battlefield, though I will note the last card in hand here for Jérémy Dezani is a powerful one. It's Pride of Conquerors.
Yep, he also has that Adanto first fort to make another creature at the end of the turn. He's electing to take the damage and perhaps set up a very potent attack for this turn.
Yeah, he will have the City's Blessing as well if he goes for it here. Can he actually get in for lethal? Feels like no.
Well, he's going to have at least 4 creatures unblocked, which makes for 12 unblocked power. However, this means that Luis is going to have to put Benalish Marshal into combat, which means it's either the Marshal or his life total.
Interesting stuff, because Benalish Marshal, of course, an important part of the puzzle for Luis, but you should note that he does have another one in his hand as well, so he may decide to play around Pride of Conquerors here.
It looks like also he protected the Marshal with Dauntless Bodyguard, which is going to make this perfect for him.
He immediately blocks the Adanto Vanguard and lets everything else getting through is only for 1 at a boy, talk about razor thin margins here, Reed. At 13 life, he's taking 12 here.
Yeah.
No wiggle room for Luis Scott-Vargas, but boy, can he actually make this work. Luis says, sure. I'll save my Benalish Marshal, and if he plays another one next turn, that is 9 points of lifelink crashing back towards Jérémy Dezani.
And we've seen this before, Marshall, which is that the player who starts out ahead, they get close to the finish line, but getting close is not always enough. If the defending player can stabilize, play out their powerful hand, get their lifelink creatures to operate at full efficacy, then Luis could very easily come back into this game.
I see. We also had a slight life total discrepancy there. Luis was actually at 16 during that attack.
I see.
So that puts him to 4, and Dezani at a very healthy 19 after gaining a bunch of life, at least some life, from that vampire in the middle, thanks to Pride of Conquerors as well. So he's at a fine life total. And the question is, what can Luis do now?
Well, he picked up a Johnny's Pride Mate, which could get 3 counters from the lifelinking creatures. I have to figure that Luis is going to use some kind of pump effect to bolster his lifelink creatures this turn, whether that be a pre-combat Benalish Marshal or potentially a Johnny's Pride Mate plus Pride of Conquerors, although that's a little bit inconvenient as he would have exactly 9 permanents.
Yes, he would. That might lean him back in the direction of just playing the Benalish Marshal instead, and that is what we're going to see here. It looks like he's going to opt to leave 1 lifelinker back and perhaps just attack with the 2 3/3 Healer's Hawks. That will put him back up to 10 and knock Jérémy down to 13. and he's going to pass the turn back. What can Jérémy find off the top of the library to help get the job done? Next turn, History of Benalia will enter Chapter 3, but for now, he would love to see one of his big sort of finishing move cards here off the top of the library.
Heroic Reinforcements, Aurelia. He needs something.
I think he found a Goblin Instigator, though, and that's not going to help him this turn. But next turn could get very, very precarious for Luis if History of Benalia gets to go to Chapter 3 untouched. And look at this board state. I mean, it's huge.
It's true. However, Luis's life total is skyrocketing with every turn that goes by. He has 9 power worth of lifelink and the Pride of Conquerors in hand. So imagine next turn he deploys a creature for a 10th permanent, casts Pride of Conquerors with City's Blessing. That's 15 points of lifelink.
That was a land off the top of the library for Luis, which lets him play 2 spells this turn. He can play History of Benalia and either a Pride Mate or a Pride of Conquerors. Is he forced to play the Pride of Conquerors, or at least highly encouraged to do so here?
Well, a player of Luis's caliber, he's going to be thinking about everything, including what happens if Jérémy Dezani picks up Heroic Reinforcements off the top. So I'm going to let Luis handle this math, but I can tell you that he is puzzling it out. He's thinking, how much do I have to leave back? How much life do I have to gain? How many blockers do I have to have if I am to survive Heroic Reinforcements? Because he's in a commanding position right now. He has lifelink, he has an Air Force, he has bigger creatures. So he wants to ask himself, what can go wrong?
Okay, Luis is going to play a Johnny's Pride Mate, pre-combat, and just attack with the 2 Hawks. That's going to get 2 counters on the Pride Mate and gain him 6 life. And now he's going to go for the slightly longer game plan here of playing out this History of Benalia. Let's see if Dezani can find some way to slam the door on the game, because is this one starting to slip away from him?
So with 5 blockers on Luis's side, a Heroic Reinforcements would have 7 creatures getting through, which is not enough to deal 16 points of damage. So as predicted, Luis has navigated in such a way where he is not dead to even the best possible top deck from Jérémy Dezani. And I think if Dezani draws something that doesn't help him in a tremendous way, he's just going to die to those 2 Healer's Hawks.
Next turn, those 2 Healer's Hawks are lethal. Now, does Dezani have any way to gain a significant amount of life here?
Got a couple of Vampire tokens.
Put him up to 9, but that wouldn't be enough, would it?
Not through Pride of Conquerors, no. Looks like Jérémy has declared an attack with his 2 Knights, which are bolstered by Chapter 3 of History of Benalia. But it looks like it's just last-ditch effort. Luis shows the Pride of Conquerors.
And that's going to do it. Luis Scott-Vargas in short order, up 2-0 over Jérémy Dezani. Wow, I'm really impressed. That was 2 fairly quick but difficult and close games where Luis was behind in the second one and on a razor-thin margin in the first game, and he came away the winner out of both. Now, we're not done here yet. We play best 3 out of 5 here on Pro Tour Sunday, so he still has to win another game to advance. And boy, if I'm sitting in Jérémy Dezani's seat, I am hating my position. He has to win 3 games in a row against Luis Scott-Vargas. Let's take a look at the sideboards as we now are transitioning from our regular play into our sideboarded play. Jérémy Dezani, let's take a look at what he's brought to the table and what stands out to you, Reduke.
The key card to look at there is Lava Coil, which is going to represent an answer to Benalish Marshall. And you can imagine if he had that in game 2 just now, it would have looked very different. Those lifelink creatures would have been 1/1s instead of 2/2s. Luis's life total would have been significantly lower. His blocks would have been less profitable. But Benalish Marshall is a huge card in this matchup, and Jérémy Dezani bringing in 3 clean answers to it can give him a little bit more wiggle room. It's an important tool, this Lava Coil, in the matchup. Additionally, 2 more powerful 4-drops, Aurelia, Exemplar of Justice, and a Johnny, Adversary of Tyrants. And it's worth pointing out that Jérémy's deck makes better use of these cards than Luis's deck because he has a higher land count and he has more token generators to potentially protect his Planeswalkers or focus on winning in the air after stalling the ground.
Okay, and on the other side of the table, that's Luis Scott-Vargas. Let's take a look at his sideboard here. 4 Experimental Frenzy. You see the 3 Baffling End, 2 Conclave Tribunal, 2 Banefire, 2 Aurelia, a Mountain, and Settle the Wreckage.
Luis has a greater diversity of weapons for the matchup. I could imagine him bringing in as many as 9 cards here. I don't think Experimental Frenzy or Banefire will come in because those cards are just a bit slow and mana inefficient. But Baffling End, just like Lava Coil, that's an answer to an opposing, Dezani does not happen to have the exact card Benalish Marshal, but could be a Danto Vanguard or, whatever it might be, an important lifelink creature. Baffling End, just an efficient answer card. Conclave Tribunal, very, very important for answering opposing Aurelias, of which Dezani is going to have 3 after sideboard. Luis highlighted Aurelia as a card that was very important in the matchup. He even said in his interview that he'd be bringing it in. And then, of course, Settle the Wreckage, a really powerful weapon to have access to. It's going to sort of keep Dezani honest with those big attacks, potentially bolstered by Heroic Reinforcements or Pride of the Conquerors.
Yeah, I heard Luis talking to Mike Burnett earlier. He said Settle the Wreckage. That might have been a little more of a disinformation campaign than a Settle the Wreckage. Apparently, they wanted people to play around it and to have to respect it, but they didn't want to have to put it in everybody's deck, so they only put it in his.
Hey, that's a real consideration when players have deck lists in this top 8 environment. I mean, you see a one-of card. That's as difficult as possible to navigate around because you know it's out there, but you know your opponent's not going to have it in a large portion of the game. So what do you do? Are you going to not make your great attack for fear of Settle the Wreckage, or are you going to send them in and get blown out? One copy is the most difficult copy to play around.
Also, I guess some of the benefits of being on a team, right? If people see Luis's deck list, they assume, well, you're on the, in this case, the ChannelFireball deck. You probably have it too. All right, underway here in game number 3. No play on turn 1 for Jérémy, but on the other side of the table, it's a Healer's Hawk. Turn 2, though, for Dezani. Nice. That's exactly what he wants to see. A Danto Vanguard here on the second turn. Leonin Vanguard and Legion's Landing now for Luis Scott-Vargas. So he does the nice curve out, the 1-drop into 2 1-drops on turn 2.
And it looks like he's actually flipped the script on Dezani here against more creatures, and in particular, creatures that are going to gain Luis life. It's a bad prospect for Dezani to have to race, but you know what? His creature is a Danto Vanguard, which sort of committed to racing. That creature does not block well.
Committed he is, and this is a beautiful curve now for Dezani. 2-drop into 3-drop, and it's 2 of the most powerful cards that you can play at those turns in this deck. It's History of Benalia hitting the battlefield for him, and providing a little blocker here for that Vampire token as well. Though I may have spoken too soon because Luis just sent it into the red zone anyway. Perhaps prioritizing transforming the Adanto into Adanto the First Fort.
I think that's the case. I think he has a hand such that he can make good use of the extra mana. And here you see him even playing a Sacred Foundry untapped. Holy cow.
Whoa, that is Aurelia Exemplar of Justice for Luis Scott-Vargas on the ramp tip here.
And here I came to the Pro Tour thinking I needed Llanowar Elves to play my 4-drops on turn 3. Luis has found a much better way to do it.
Wow, this is what Jérémy Dezani is supposed to be doing. Red-white ramp for Luis Scott-Vargas somehow comes up with Aurelia ahead of the curve. But the critical answer now from Dezani, he has Conclave Tribunal, and he's going to take down Aurelia right now, so she never gets to do anything. That was key for Jérémy.
Absolutely it was.
Dezani runs copies of Aurelia in his deck as well, and he says, I'm the one who's supposed to be doing that.
Conclave Tribunal, really the only clean answer to Aurelia that these decks have access to.
Wow, and Jérémy Dezani's hand is absurd as well. Look at that. Aurelia and Heroic Reinforcements. Lava Coil as well. Boy, if he can find that fourth land, he can start deploying these huge game enders as well.
But look at this that Luis set up here. He deploys a Johnny's Pride Mate on the same turn that he's able to protect it with a bodyguard. So despite having to pass one narrow turn's worth of window of a Johnny's Pride Mate being only a 4/4, that in quotes, only a 4/4.
Yeah.
But it is vulnerable to Lava Coil only for this one turn, and Luis protects it with Dauntless Bodyguard, excuse me. Next turn, Johnny's Pride Mate has the potential to be as big as 6/6 or 7/7, and it'll be too late.
By the way, Luis Scott-Vargas, he's got Settle the Wreckage in his hand, and that is the type of card that can be devastating if Jérémy finds himself in a position where he feels like he needs to push with a card like Heroic Reinforcements, particularly if it comes after casting Hareruya. Though that's all down the line because Dezani does not have land number 4 at this point, and this Johnny's Pride Mate is growing bigger and bigger, and it's going to be very pesky to get off the battlefield without using a card like Tribunal.
We'll also note, Marshall, Settle the Wreckage, a perfect pairing with Adanto the First Fort for 2 reasons. The first is that it's well disguised. You might think your opponent is just leaving 4 mana to make a 1/1 vampire token when really they're holding up Settle the Wreckage. The second is that Dezani's going to feel a sense of urgency. He has to force the action and win the game because a stalemate is going to favor Luis with his land generating 1/1 lifelink tokens every turn.
Critically here for Jérémy Dezani, he finds land number 4. This is going to open up options to him in the form of Hareruya, Exemplar of Justice, or Heroic Reinforcements going forward, and could be the key to a win if he's going to find victory here in the third game. Looks like he's also considering just playing Conclave Tribunal and getting rid of this Pride Mate straight away. It's exactly what's going to happen. Conclave Tribunal takes out that Pride Mate. The bodyguard no longer, or not able to protect it from enchantment-based removal. Dezani deciding if he wants to attack with one or both, and he decides for both.
So Luis has a reasonably profitable block on the Knight. I'm sorry, this was the turn that History of Benalia went off. So no real appealing blocks there, and Luis's life total is high enough that he's fine taking the damage. Also, when you have a card like Settle the Wreckage in your hand, you want to incentivize your opponent to build up a big board and set up one big attack. So trading off not necessarily what Luis is interested in right now.
Ooh, another nice draw here for Luis Scott-Vargas. He finds Banalish Marshal. Plays that pre-combat attacks with everything. Luis predicted the block, says, yep, sure, that's fine. We'll trade off these creatures on the ground, and I get in with the rest. Pass the turn back. So now Dezani down to just an Adanto Vanguard, but he does have that critical 4th mana, so he can deploy Hareruya or even start getting Heroic Reinforcements going if you'd like. Life total, though, down to 8. He needs to start affecting the board in a big way.
Boy, Dezani's hand is super strong, but it's clunky. He can really only cast 1 spell per turn, while Luis is maintaining his position on the battlefield and potentially taking more than 1 action per turn. But actually, Dezani picks up a nice 2-mana spell, so he's able to Lava Coil the Marshal and put another attacker, so it could actually be Luis that has his back against the wall a little bit.
Yeah, that does seem to be the case here, as Jérémy Dezani has found the real expensive cards in his deck. Now, expensive in this case means 4 mana, but these are very powerful effects in a matchup like this, and he has access to either of them that he wants. But Luis keeps bringing the hits as well. There's History of Benalia hitting the battlefield while that Hawk keeps getting in there.
And note that with the life totals this low, the Adanto Vanguard does start to lose a little bit of its potency. Imagine just a 1/1 lifelink token blocking Adanto Vanguard. Sure, Dezani can pay 4 life, make it indestructible, eat the token, but that is going to be a 5-point life swing in favor of Luis Scott-Vargas. You can't make too many of those before the game's just over.
This is a very close game that we've got. Are we going to see Hareruya? There she is. Hareruya, Exemplar of Justice, hits the battlefield.
Pre-combat this time.
And this could be an interesting setup here as well. If next turn Jérémy Dezani goes for heroic reinforcements, and Luis is able to deploy Settle the Wreckage. It could be an absolute disaster for Jérémy. You mentioned it too. Luis has the ability to really sell it thanks to Adanto the First Fort.
And we talked about that one-of, Marshall, a one-of niche card like Settle the Wreckage. That's the type of card, you know, you play around it if things are going well. If you have the luxury of taking a really careful line, you might choose to do that. But this game is very close. Jérémy Dezani has to take his spots where he can get them. And I think it's going to be really, really hard for him to make the judgment call to not attack if Luis leaves a profitable-looking opening. So right now, Dezani is deciding whether he wants to trade creatures or pay the 4 life to keep his Adanto Vanguard around.
Be a very steep cost to pay, wouldn't it? Okay, Luis draws his card for the turn. Ooh, don't let him see that one. Oh, boy, Luis playing with fire here almost shows him to Settle the Wreckage. If Jérémy had seen that. Now Luis has separated out Adanto the First Fort. Looking like he's getting itchy to make a token here.
He's almost like, I'll make a token on my main. Actually, I guess I'll wait till end of your turn.
I might as well
Go
just
ahead.
wait.
I might as well wait.
Does Jérémy Dezani take the bait and go for heroic reinforcements? His only other play this turn is an Adanto Vanguard. Doesn't look super appealing, as we've been noting. Adanto Vanguard not great in this situation. There it is, heroic reinforcements from Dezani.
Big turn, Marshall.
He makes the 2 creatures. What kind of an attack does he line up?
He is dead on the backswing if he doesn't have any blockers for the 2 knights.
So he's incentivized to leave something back anyway, right?
Well, Aurelia has Vigilance and is a nice blocker. She's coming in.
Oh, the other 2 tokens are. And here comes Adanto Vanguard. Now Jérémy's going to take a moment to line up the perceived blocks. Look at Luis. He's grabbed a vampire token
from
the pile.
That is the pen trick at its most elite form.
Even Jérémy grabbed it for him now and says, what happens if you make the token? Can Luis lure Jérémy Dezani into the full attack here and get him with Settle the Wreckage? And there it is, Settle the Wreckage from Luis Scott-Vargas, and he wins 3 games to 0 over Jérémy Dezani to put himself back into the Pro Tour Finals.
Amazing stuff. That was a great match, a great display of Luis's both playing prowess as a competitor, but also his deck that he's brought to the tournament, which it seems to me has a noticeable advantage in these White Mirror matches.
I can't lie. He won that in the most Luis Scott-Vargas way possible. He had a card in his sideboard that was meant to throw off the vast majority of opponents after they saw the deck list. He brought it in anyway. Then he tried to sell it and sell it and sell it. And finally, Jérémy Dezani said, I'll buy it. And he sprung his trap. And Luis Scott-Vargas wins 3 games to 0. Now, that is going to set up our finals, where he is going to be facing down Andrew Ellenbogen from the United States. So we have an all-USA finals, all red-white aggro from our 2 players remaining. Oh, boy, that was exciting stuff, Reed. We don't get moments like that often here, and I love it when it happens.
Yeah, that was great. You know, I have to say, whatever the plan may have been coming into the tournament, I don't think Luis has it in him to leave a spicy one-of card in his sideboard. I think he just probably, you know, in the moment could not resist, and it came through big there, him being able to navigate to the perfect situation.
No, you are correct. You are correct about that, Reed. That is not the way that Luis rolls. Speaking of Luis, we have Brian David Marshall down in the feature match area with Luis Scott-Vargas right now.
Thanks, Marshall. I'm here with Luis Scott-Vargas, who will not settle for anything less than a finals appearance here at this Pro Tour. Luis, talk us through those last couple turns, knowing you're sitting on that card. How are you not just giggling to yourself the whole time?
The absurd part is the only reason I have Settle the Wreckage in my deck is our team wanted one of us to play one Settle the Wreckage so people would be scared of it. And I was like, whatever. We were gonna roll for it. And I was like, whatever. I'll just play it. I don't care. It just sounds funny. I just wanted the story. And then it was the perfect setup because I had Adanto. So if he doesn't do anything, I just make an Adanto token, make a vampire, and it conceals the Settle. And there's just really nothing he could do about that.
So what are you thinking about on those last couple turns going back and forth? I mean, you feel pretty confident that this game is going to be yours and you just have to not represent it too strongly?
Yeah. I kept drawing too many good cards, so I couldn't leave Settle up. The History of Benalia and Benalish Marshall and whatnot. But then I finally drew a brick and could leave Settle up, and it was just the turn he cast Heroic Reinforcements. It was just like the stars aligned.
Now, I got to ask you something about these white decks in general. It reminds me a little bit of when you made the top 8 in Berlin. Your big finish, and the elf deck was everywhere, and there were all these different variations of the elf deck. But you said this is a little different than that field.
It's a little different in that elves was busted, and that's why there were 6 decks in the top 8. White Weenie is not busted. I think the deck is good. If you're deciding what deck to build next, this is a nice arena precon actually. Johnny's Pridemate and all. It's a good deck, but it's not a busted deck. It just the stars aligned and the cards broke such that there's 6 in the top 8. What is similar to Berlin, though, is I think we have a version that's good in the mirror. In this case, a Johnny's Pridemate, it just runs rampant over the field.
All right, a Johnny's Pridemate has been running rampant. One more match to go for Luis Scott-Vargas to get his second win. Otherwise, you're going to fall below par, 1 in 8 wins.
Right.
So he's looking to get above average here at Pro Tour Guilds of Ravnica. So that's it for the semifinals. The finals will be coming up right after this.